Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in a second. Let me get the waiting room away so people can join. Cool, cool, cool. So yes, we'll get started in a second. We are going to talk first about our first practice test. So that should be fun. And then we will get to some questions later. I'm just seeing who's all here. Okay, looks like we got a lot of people. If you do have any immediate questions, things that have been bothering you for the week, now would be a good time to chat them to me so that I can either work them into what we're going to talk about or answer them right away. Some of you have been using the chat. That's great. I love responding to that. So yes, remember, and you can call me and when you do the chat. Just call me Mike. You don't need to do any Mr. Settele or anything like that. That's just odd for me. So Mike is fine. And yeah, I'm happy to help you guys, especially as you get deeper into this. There'll be more and more questions. And just do a quick head count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, cool. All right. And I hope everyone has been keeping up with the homeworks. Hopefully that was a little bit easier this week as we got into things that were a little bit more of a traditional way of remembering things and studying things. That's definitely what we want, is things to be memorized. But yes, the main thing we're going to be thinking about always is strategies. And yeah, this is our third class, so we're a little bit getting close to halfway through. The August SAT, I believe, is 6 weeks away. I can tell you in a second. Yeah, a little over 5 weeks. So that's still plenty of time to change our process, still plenty of time to integrate these new ways of doing things, but make sure that you are actually trying to do that. Let me just see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, we are still at 8, so at this point, people who are late can catch up, and we'll talk about this stuff here. So yes, make sure you are using, there we go, the chat feature and everything like that. All the information is here if you need it. I did make an announcement as well in this class this week, so make sure you're checking in here maybe every day, every other day, just in case there's some information that can help you. I'm constantly making updates to the portal, the homework portal, so hopefully there'll be some new features as well this coming week. But our big event for this week is we are going to take our first practice test. So I want to make sure that we understand how that's going to work. And we've got a good procedure for that, because that's very important that we do any of the practice tests correctly, using the right methods, using the right ideas. And so the first one especially is important because it's really crucial that we get to try out what we have learned over the first two classes. So just as a quick recap, in our first class, we talked about the main strategies for both the math and reading sections. So we talked about plug points into equations as our main math strategy. We talked about dumb summaries as our main reading strategy. And we were trying to integrate those strategies into as many questions as possible. So those are the main things we're going to be doing for the first practice test, is trying our best to use those. And then, of course, in the second week, we got into some of that traditional stuff. We talked about grammar rules. We talked about the transition words and the transition questions. And then for math, we talked about the basic information we need for lines and for quadratics. And those are big topics. All four of those things are big topics on the SAT. They are also predictable topics. So they're ones where we know what to expect, and that's a good thing. There will be unpredictable questions, but the more we can lock in those predictable points, the better we're going to be. So like I said, step 3, today's class is going to start by just going over the essentials for the first practice test that we're going to take, but we will get into some questions to reinforce those strategies and memorization pieces from classes 1 and 2. So what do we need to do? Well, our tasks, basically 4 big things that we want to make sure we're focused on. The pacing strategy for each section, which I don't think we've talked a ton about, but we will. The way that the bookmarks are going to work as we take the test and review the test. How we're going to use the Blue Book app for the SAT that we're going to take, and how we're supposed to review the test in the most effective way possible. So all of those things are very important. So let's get into the pacing strategies first. And definitely remember, these videos are posted for the class. So if you need a refresher on this before you take your test, that's why I'm doing this right up front, is to make sure that you guys have an easy way to access it, because this pacing strategy is very important. Remember, the SAT is adaptive. So the first module for each section should be fairly even keeled, right? You're going to have some easy questions, a couple of hard ones, but mostly kind of stuff in the middle. And you probably won't feel as much of a time pressure in those first modules. So hopefully you have time to check your work. If you do have a hard question that you're struggling with, hopefully you have the time to work it through and really just try different strategies, take some shots at it, all stuff like that. But then we get to hopefully, the hard modules. If you make too many mistakes in the first module, they'll put you in an easy one, and you'll know that within probably like 5 questions, whether you're in the easy module or not. But based on the scores that some of you guys have entered into the portal for me, I've taken a look at that. It does seem that most of us are probably going to be in the hard second module for each subject, which is great. But it also means that it will be hard. And that means right out of the gate, we can't be like lollygagging through the section the same way we were for the first section. The pacing is going to be absolutely brutal in those second modules if we're in the hard ones. And so we've got to be moving fast right away. And we've got to be getting through the questions that are predictable right away, but also knowing when to skip things. And I want to make sure we talk about that. But I will say, even by the time we take the SAT, it is very unlikely that you will feel really good about those hard modules. You will still probably have to make choices about what to skip and what to spend time on, and you will probably not get to every single question, or at least not get to it thoroughly. And I say that because that's how I feel taking the hard modules. On my June SAT, I was very proud. I was able to answer everything, even in the hard reading module, in a way that I felt pretty good about. I still got something wrong. I got a 1580 on that test. So some reading question somewhere I got wrong. I'll never know. But the math was perfect. And with math, I did have time to check things in the hard module, but it's close. And if it's close for me, it's going to be close for you. But one of the things we can do to make sure we are still maximizing the score is that we are targeting the right questions, at least at first in the module. So for reading, the thing we need to make sure we do is start by skipping to question 15 in both reading modules, even in the easier one at the beginning. And 15 is usually where the first grammar question is. It might be number 14, it might be number 16 or 17, but 15 is just go to there first and look for that first grammar question. It's going to have the phrase standard English conventions in there somewhere. So in the question, so you'll know instantly, and hopefully just from practice, what a grammar question looks like. But you want to start with those because the grammar, like we saw last week, is very predictable. There are certain rules that come up again and again. You guys have studied those rules for homework this week, hopefully. And that means you're going to be able to add in a lot of points pretty confidently and pretty quickly. So it just, in terms of score, it's good for us to lock in points early on. And also in terms of just our like confidence level, it's good to start with grammar because we'll probably be getting a lot of those questions right really quickly. So that's good for us. If we start with the passages, obviously that's going to be a different story. So with reading, start with the grammar questions. The next grouping will be the transitions. Then the outlines are the ones that are at the end. Those are those ones with the bullet points, and those are very easy. We did talk about those, and they should have come up in the homework as well. And even though they're last in the section, we don't want to do them last because we don't want to accidentally run out of time with some of those left to go because they're so easy, at least compared to the passages. So this is our way of playing defense and making sure that at the very least, we are not running out of time on the easier questions. This is really important to do that. Once we're done with the outlines, we'll go to the vocab questions, which are the ones at the beginning. So we're going from question 15 to 27, and then starting back at number 1 for the vocab. And then we'll end with the passages and skip around. Even in the first module, feel free to skip around, but especially in the hard module because the passages are not in order of difficulty. So it's not like the first passage is the easiest and the last passage is the hardest. It really depends. It depends on just like random chance, what order we get. It also depends on which certain types tend to be harder or easier. Personally, I find the main idea ones to be fairly easy. I find the graphs and charts questions to be very hard and time consuming. But then after those are usually the logic questions, the inference ones. And I also find those to be fairly easy because they lend themselves to dumb summaries a lot. So I usually end up skipping those graph and chart questions in the beginning or in the middle there so that if I do run out of time, at the very least, I'm running out of time with stuff that I don't really feel confident in anyway. So make sure you are doing that. And make sure as you're skipping around, you're not like spending a minute and a half reading a question and then figuring out that you don't really understand it. It's got to be a gut thing. You look at it and you're like, oh, this looks like it's going to be annoying. I'm going to skip it. And hopefully you'll have time to come back. But that's at least the first idea is you want to be able to do the questions you're going to feel most comfortable with. If any point with any of this stuff you guys have questions, please put in the chat. This is definitely a lot of logistics up front, but I really want to make sure we understand this and do this right. So feel free, don't be shy about chatting privately or chatting in the group, whatever works. But I will say one other thing. A lot of my students often, for whatever reason, understand this pacing strategy, but still like to start with the vocab questions. I think because they're first and they're quick, so I get it. But my reason for not doing that is it then disrupts the order a little too much. Plus, I think that sometimes it hurts our confidence when we see a vocab question where we don't know the words. And now early on in our SAT, we have to guess. So yes, we're going to make sure that we don't start off with guessing on things randomly. So hopefully all this makes sense with the reading pacing. We will get to bookmarks, so don't worry there. For the math, things are much simpler. So that's why this column is shorter. The math is in order of difficulty. So the easier questions for both modules are going to be at the beginning, and the harder questions are going to be at the end. It's not perfectly linear, so it's not always going to be the case, for example, that number 22 is the hardest, and it's slightly harder than number 21 and number 19 and number 15. And that's why this box right here, this last box is there. Basically, you want to, in both modules, really focus on questions 1 to 14. Even in the hard module, those are going to be questions that with patience and some good strategy, you should be able to get right, as long as you're avoiding traps, not making careless mistakes, things like that. That's a very important goal, is to get everything right from 1 to 14 in both modules. It might not happen in this first test, but it's our goal. Then when you get to 15, similar to the passages, skip around to find things that you like. Number 15 might be really hard for you. If you're not great at geometry and it happens to be a complicated looking geometry question, don't feel compelled to do it. Skip 15 and go to 16, go to 17. Look for opportunities that you think you're going to be able to get right. A lot of those questions are going to be ones that are plug points into equations. So if you see very quickly that a question involves points and equations, that's a good target. Try that. See if you can work with it, because either you can throw it in Desmos and graph something, or maybe you can just do the strategy the normal way, plug the points in and see what happens. So the pacing strategy overlaps with kind of our goal for the first practice test, which is to really make sure we're prioritizing questions where the strategies will work, the plug points into equations, the dumb summaries. So it would be bad to get a kind of like easy pickings, plug points into equation strategy question wrong on the SAT because you didn't pace yourself right, because you ran out of time, you didn't get a chance to see it. So try to really hunt for those opportunities. That's a big goal for the pacing. The only other thing maybe I should have put here, and I didn't, is if you do run out of time, don't leave anything blank. Make sure that you put an answer for everything. Guess randomly for any question that you don't get to. So when the timer at the top says 1 minute left, find all the questions that you left blank. You can just open it up like overview at the bottom, and it'll show you which ones you haven't answered. Go to all of them, pick a random letter, and then even for the math ones where there are no answer choices, just enter a random number. Just put something in there. It's better to have an answer and have a chance of getting it right than to leave it blank. So never leave questions blank on the SAT. Any questions about the pacing strategy before I move on?
Yeah, I got one.
Yes, go for it. Yes,
So
yeah, right.
in the math section, so are you saying we should go through questions 1 through 14, and then after 15 we start skipping?
Yeah, 1 to 14, even, maybe this is important to say, yes, is even in the hard module with 1 to 14, if it feels hard, it's probably more you getting intimidated by the question than by it actually being hard. So maybe it's got like a wacky looking equation, or it's like a story kind of surrounding an equation, or even just like something geometry related. We haven't talked much about that topic, but those kinds of things, it's probably there's one little twist. And so those are great opportunities for the strategies, because a lot of times, even if something looks intimidating, it's just some points and equations. Plug them in, arithmetize some numbers, guess and check. Those would be good targets, because a number 13 that looks hard is probably solvable with patience. But a number 17 that looks hard is probably genuinely hard and might not be a good use of your time. So it's not like the hard questions are worth more. It's more complicated than that. But basically, if you can answer three medium and easy questions in the time it takes you to answer one hard one, the three are much better. Those are much better targets. So you probably just don't really want to be skipping around before question 15 because have some confidence in yourself, have some faith in yourself. You can probably figure those out. But then, yes, once you get to 15, all bets are off. Just like if something looks hard, leave it blank, move on, find something that you particularly like, that you feel confident with, and do it. The entire goal is to just get as many questions right as possible. So the more of that you can do, the better. Does that answer your question, Neil, or is there any more to it?
Yeah, that's a good answer.
Cool. Yes. Any other pacing related questions? That was a good question. Okay. If there are, feel free to chat them, but let's move on to the next thing. The bookmarks. This is where I become a bit of a nag. Okay. So the bookmarks are very important. I did talk about this, I believe, in our first class a little bit about how important it is to be aware of your confidence level before you know if you're right or wrong. So when we're doing the homework exercises and it's just one question at a time, you want to be thinking about those bookmarks before you check to see if you're right. Am I more than 90%, 95% sure that I'm right? Did I prove my answer quickly and confidently? If the answer is yes, no bookmark necessary. But if the answer is no, that's when we want to mark it. Now, the problem is on the practice test, we want to do the same thing, but the College Board's Blue Book app, where you're going to take the practice tests, does not save those bookmarks. So you have to save them in some way. And the easiest way is just on your scratch paper, write like reading module one, and then start listing the numbers of the questions that you bookmark as you go. Same thing, reading module two, listing question numbers. And then later we can sync it with my site and everything will work out. But we really need to keep track of those because as soon as you move on to the next section, all your bookmarks are lost. As soon as you submit your scores, all your bookmarks are lost. But we really need to know which questions you struggled with because you might get some of them right, but that doesn't mean that's not a good thing necessarily. If you just guessed randomly or you took forever to figure it out, that's an opportunity to learn. So the bookmarks are our way of really making sure our like review is as thorough as possible. I do not think taking photos or screenshots, Laird, good question, is going to be effective. It's going to take time. I also I don't love doing that in the Blue Book app because if you read their like terms and conditions, they're really like they make a point of saying that the College Board that they don't want you recording or using screenshots in their app. Obviously, on a real test, that would be cheating and they would invalidate your scores and all sorts of horrible things would happen. On a practice test, I mean, I've done it. Like it's how I know what the questions myself, and I have videos of me taking the test, so who knows? But I do worry that's being watched in some way. So it's better to just avoid that. I don't, this is maybe me being just paranoid, but I think it's better to not be taking screenshots of the Blue Book app if you can avoid it, just in case. I don't think it's going to do anything, but at the same time, I don't know. College Board is weird. So might as well not attract the eye of Sauron. There's another solution though. This bookmarker app thing. So let me show you. In the portal here, if you go to scores, in the portal. Can everyone see this? Is this recording? Let me just make sure. Yeah, okay, good. If you go here, right now we have some buttons. I added some buttons for you guys. So practice test instructions you should read this before you take the practice test. I'm giving you a lot of the instructions here, but this is a good thing to go over. Supplies and setting, going into the Blue Book app. If you have no idea what I'm talking about with the Blue Book app, this is perfect. I've got the link and everything here. This is how you will take both the practice tests and the real SATs. That's all there. Here's me, again, nagging you about the bookmarks. And then there's this button here, this bookmarker app. If you click that, you have the ability to bookmark as you go. So if I hit begin bookmarking, it should, yes, perfect, populate this with these little question numbers. So this is going to be the first reading module. So there's 27 of them. And literally you can have this open on your screen as you go, or you can put it on your phone and that way it's just right next to you and just tap them. I'm going to bookmark 2, going to bookmark 8, going to bookmark 16, 17, 18, right? Whatever it is. And then when you change sections, it's going to reset it and then same thing. And they're preserved, right? They're there. And so this allows you to just keep track of this without having to really worry about it. It's saved on my site and it's not going anywhere. And then later, when you upload your info, all your answers to my site, this will still be there. So you won't have to do it again. It'll just sync automatically if it works correctly. So I recommend this. That way you've got that. But also you can see here that training mode that I announced in as a new feature is there. And I'm fine with you guys having this out to help you do the strategies on this first test. For the second test, I would say this is something you want to turn off and try to do from memory. But if you need help remembering those trap answer categories for the reading modules, great. That's perfect. That's fine to do that. So they're there. It might slow you down a little bit, but I'd rather you be getting that constant reminder to use the strategies, to think about the specific grammar rules. You get a little bit of a boost with the transition words. So it's a good little training wheels kind of situation. In math, we have that constant reminder. Do I have points? Do I have equations? If I've got both, I'm just going to plug points into equations. So it's a good way to force yourself to think about new ways of solving questions. If you want to turn it off, it's up here. So you can just turn it off and it'll go away. But I think I turned it on for everyone. So it's there by default. And I have no problem with you using it because the first test is much more about trying to integrate these strategies into your process. So if that's what helps, so be it. That's great. And if you are really into using my site, this full entry thing, just to show you, allows you to not only bookmark things as you go, but also record your answers and cross things out. You can cross things out in the Blue Book app, but that also does not save. So if you want to keep track of what you eliminated, this can do that. This also would save your answers in case for some reason the test doesn't upload correctly to the College Board website. That's very rare, but it does happen where sometimes there's a glitch and you take a practice test and then it never shows up in your results. So if you're worried about that happening, this is your way of preventing that, because then if that happens, you can just re-enter your answers again. So I don't think this is going to be necessary, but I built it just in case. So it's there. Cool. But yes, the bookmarks, very important. If you do not bookmark things, that's very bad. Then you're not taking the test right, and you're not going to be reviewing the test right. So hopefully that is all strongly conveyed. Any questions on the bookmarks? Cool. All right, if they do come up, just feel free to ask. We got some good questions. Which test? Some of you have already been asking me this. Honestly, the short answer of which test to take, it doesn't matter. We've got people in this class who are at all levels of their SAT prep. Some of you have been doing SAT prep on your own for a long time. Maybe you've taken some of these practice tests before. If you're completely new to SAT prep, if you've never done one, I would recommend doing 8, 9, or 10 first, mostly because of the way that those particular tests were made. There's just more spoilers out there. They're from older exams that they discontinued. It doesn't really matter, but those are good ones as like a first test. But literally, it doesn't matter. They're all going to be good representations of the actual SAT. I don't think that any of these tests are easier or harder in a way that affects the scores. Again, I've taken the real SAT multiple times now, this digital version. I stand by it. The practice tests in Blue Book are a good representation of the actual exam. There's hard questions, there's easy questions, there's predictable questions, there's unpredictable questions. It's a good mix. And since we are not going to be reviewing the test together, we can all take different tests and it won't matter. It'll all show up in the app. So you'll be able to review whatever test you take on your own using the videos and everything like that. So doesn't matter. If you've already taken all the practice tests, that's maybe a different story. Then my advice is just take one that you took first, and hopefully you don't remember the question super well, but it is going to be a little bit of a problem if that's the case. Any questions on that one? That's pretty easy. Okay. Now, as I said, procedure, all the test instructions are found in the portal. That was all this here. Again, look it over. It's just pretty easy. The most important thing is here, don't ever print out a practice test. They have these like PDFs that you might bump into at various points. If you are, it says there's like links in Blue Book, there's things online,
What
but
was
the
that?
PDFs. Oh, what? Yep. Oh, Amino, just mute unless you have a question. Okay, there we go. Thanks. So the linear practice tests, those are the PDF ones. Those are not good. Those are not exactly the same format of the test that you will take. So we don't want to do that. The other thing is just, generally, There we go.
Sorry about that.
Make No, no worries. Make the SAT feel, or make the practice SAT feel as real as possible. This is why we don't do practice tests every week. This is why we spread them out, is I want them to feel special. And so you can take charge of that. You can help them make them feel special by setting yourself up for success. Try to be in a quiet room. Don't have music playing. Tell your family to leave you alone. Turn your phone off. Put it away. Get your pets out of the room. No petting cats while you're taking an SAT. Sit at a desk with your feet on the ground. Don't take it on your bed, sprawled out. Don't take it on a couch. Make it feel like a test. Sit at a table, sit at a desk, in a chair. I also recommend taking it in the morning if you can, because you'll be well rested. That's when the real SAT is. So it's setting you up for that. And obviously try to get maybe a better night's sleep before you take it. So that way you feel well rested as well. But if you're trying to force in a practice test at 8 o'clock at night after a long day, it's not going to go well. And you're not going to be able to think about those strategies the way we want. And when I say fight, I just mean fight for every point, right? Don't shrug off careless mistakes. Force yourself to use the scratch paper, write things down. Don't do stuff in your head. Don't take shortcuts. Every question is potentially 10 or 20 points. So even if you fix 10 or 1 or 2 like simple mistakes, that might boost your score like 30 points. So it matters to make sure that you're not just being lazy about things. Fight for every point. And then when you're done, enter your answers or results into the portal after. So if you need help with that, there is a video that walks you through it, but it's going to be this little thing. Go to answer entry page. And this is basically because the College Board's score report is terrible. When you do this, you will select, it'll look different for you. It'll look more clear, but you'll just take your test. So say you take test 8, confirm. It's going to create all your answers. You're going to get okay, I took it this day. I got a 560, a 610, whatever. Enter this, you'll get these. Click these things, make sure these are all entered. Right, this is all on the College Board website. You're just copying that over. Same thing with the wrong answers. This, you'll just click which questions you got wrong, and it'll do that. Probably the second module will have more because it's harder. And just click some things. There we go. Confirm, 19 correct. This is the part where one screws up because it's hard to describe. But basically, you need to tell my system which module you were in. So this is both the easy and hard module for each section. And these are the first 5 correct answers from the answer key for those second modules. So again, this video up here will walk you through this. So watch the video if you need. But basically, you have to tell it which module you got into. It doesn't say anywhere in the College Board's website. You have to tell it. So make sure you do the right one. Otherwise, the score report, you'll have to re-enter everything. And then for anything that you got wrong, it'll force you to put in the answer that you put. It won't let you select the correct answer. So that's one way of checking that you entered everything right. You shouldn't have any blanks, but for the sake of moving faster, I'm going to leave some blank. Your bookmarks normally will sync, like I said. And there you go. I'm just going to click some things. And then when it's all said and done, it should show up as a much more beautiful score report. Some of you might have already seen these if you took practice tests and you entered them, but this is where you're going to review things. This is way better than the College Board's thing because we get a lot of information. So I don't want to go into all of it, but this reviewing of the test is honestly more important than the taking of the test. So we got to make sure we do it right. So a couple things about it. First of all, do not review the test the same day that you take it. If you're anything like me, after you take an SAT, your brain is a pile of mush. You are not going to be able to think about anything more, probably for the rest of that day. Play some video games, eat some pizza and ice cream, go relax somewhere. You've earned it. So don't feel that compulsion to start checking your answers and be like, why did I get this wrong? Let it sit. Just enter it so it's done, but then come back to it the next day. It's much better if you can review that way. And like I said, do not use the College Board explanations. They're terrible. They don't involve any strategies. They're very confusing. Don't even bother looking at them. And do not cut corners. This review really is important. So we'll use this score report, and it defaults, you can see, to showing us the bookmarked questions and the wrong answers. And you can see here too, on the left, it has the percentages. And if you click this, it'll show you the raw numbers of the questions that you got wrong, but also how the bookmarks overlapped with that. So remember that when I was nagging you about the bookmarks, the worst case scenario is this 11%. Questions that you got wrong but didn't bookmark, mistakes you made that you didn't see coming, careless mistakes, trap answers, things like that. We want that number as low as possible. For this first test, not a huge deal, but it's something to focus on. Those errors are the worst. If you got something wrong that you bookmarked, well, okay, that sucks, but you knew it. You saw it coming. So that's really good. And or at least you're thinking about it the right way. You saw the trouble coming. So when you're reviewing things, we definitely want to review any question we got wrong. So if you click review, you will see the question and your answer and the ability to watch the video. So if you click it, it's going to play. You should watch the whole thing. And then it will also darken the review box. So that way you know you did it. So you don't have to do this in one day. You can also spread this out, this review, and that way you can keep track of what you've already watched. So you want to watch the video for anything you got wrong, anything you got wrong and bookmarked, but also anything that you got right and bookmarked. Because why did you get it right? And why did you bookmark it, right? You weren't sure of that answer. There was something about it that you weren't confident in. And maybe you just lucky guessed your way to the answer. Obviously, we want to know what happened and you want to look at that. But also maybe you were slow in getting your answer. You were sure of it, but it just took you a while. And maybe something in my video will show you there was a faster way, a strategic way to do it. So no matter what your score is, this step is really important because it allows you to have more and more opportunities to learn from mistakes, learn from your stumbles. So if you're just reviewing wrong answers, you're missing out on opportunities to learn. So those bookmarks are really important for giving us more opportunities. This little gray thing here, this just means this is one of those pre-test questions that doesn't count for your score. So if you got one of these wrong, it's not affecting the score, but you would never know about these. Honestly, they don't really matter. I just did this so that I would know more than anything, but that's there. You can also sort here by like certain types of categories, certain types of things. Here's my positives question. It also says it here. But yeah, this is really useful for you seeing what's going on with your results. I recommend watching the videos for the individual questions. If you really want to see how to improve your pacing, you could watch me take some of the practice tests, not all of them, but that's one way to see how fast I go as I take the test for the first time. And that can help you understand where you might be able to cut some corners. Whew, we're almost done with this. Then we'll get to some questions. Any questions on this, though, on reviewing the test? This is the most important piece of our homework for this week. The test is important to take, but if we don't review it right, it's just wasted time. So any questions on reviewing the test right? Cool, cool. Anything comes up, let me know. I don't remember what else I have as a slide. Okay, just a summary here. Goal for this step is to try what you learned, as I said. Our high priority is getting experience with the strategies, taking chances with the strategies, seeing if we can get them to work in places we'd never expect, and just building our comfort with them. A low priority is the scores. Because you're trying new methods here, you might do worse than your previous SAT or your previous practice test. And if that happens, it's not a big deal. It's fine. It's okay. We're just learning new things and it takes a little bit of time to get used to that. But the next practice test, the second one, is when we would want to see score improvement. So if it doesn't go great here, nothing to worry about. As long as you're trying out new stuff and reviewing it the right way, you will learn from those mistakes and the score will improve next time. So don't worry about maximizing the score. We will get there. Any other questions about the practice test before we get into some actual questions here? Cool. All right, well, if anything comes up, let me know. Again, you can always chat, but yeah, we want to make sure we're doing this right. So now let me do a couple different things here. If you guys are ready for some practice questions, we can go to the Satelevision for class. This is in the home page of the homework portal. So we always go here and I will pull it up as well. We should see last week's question and our strategy training mode, but let's turn that off so it's out of the way. And you can go there. I'm going to rearrange my screen and I'm going to give you guys a new question and we'll get to it. And I know we do have a new student, so if you hopefully know how to get to all this, that's great. If not, feel free to let me know and I can guide you. But when you're there, we should see a grammar question pop up. There it is. So I'm going to rearrange my screen while you guys work on that one. And we're doing grammar first because that's what we should do on the reading section. So that's why that's coming first. So let's move this around, share this window instead. I think that worked. Yes, cool. This happened last time. You. How? It's immersive view. I don't think I want that. Oh, perfect. That's what I wanted. Remember, you can cross out answers. You can choose your answer. Got some people not here. Now, I will say this is a good example of a question that we would want to make sure we are prioritizing for our first practice test because it involves basic knowledge that we're supposed to have about the grammar rules, right? So this gets to our main strategy for grammar, which was to predict the rule. We need to look at the answer choices first, and right away, there's one answer choice that stands out to me as a kind of like high priority. Does anyone know what it is? Which answer choice jumps out first as the one to focus on? Not necessarily being right, the one to focus on. Feel free to, yep, Liam is right. The colon, yes. So choice D has a colon. And again, I don't know if it's right, but I do know it has a set rule, right? In order to use a colon, I need to have a complete sentence beforehand. And afterwards, I have some flexibility. It could be another sentence. It could be one word. It could be a clause. It could be a list. We got lots of options. So they're very flexible. And so the reason this is great for us to start with is this part is not flexible. So it has a simple test, right? Commas, there's a million comma rules, but this in particular is set in stone. So I would just read and I would say, okay, is this a sentence? FlexiCell, which incorporates flexible polymer substrates instead of rigid silicon wafers, seeks to maximize energy absorption across curved surfaces. Yeah. And notice I'm really letting it sit, right? If that colon is right, it's basically acting like a period. So I'm letting it sit, I'm letting it end. So that seems okay. It seems like a sentence. But now I'd be like, okay, what's going on after? Because that might affect it too. So if I'm picking D, right, it's a temporary pick. Utilizing bendable photovoltaic cells, the flexible panel conforms to irregular roof shapes while maintaining optimal sunlight capture. Ugh, it's a mouthful. But it's a sentence. And so I've got two sentences. Do I have any other choice that can combine two sentences? Oh, I'm seeing some flips. Some people are flipping things. I'm going to try to score it beforehand. D. D is our answer. I have no choice here. I have to pick D because it is the only one that allows me to join two sentences. A comma is not strong enough. And so we need to be careful here. This is definitely trying to take advantage of our kind of normal way of talking. Something like A or B feels like it could be right, because if I'm not paying attention to the punctuation, if I haven't predicted the rule correctly, I might say something like FlexiCell seeks to maximize energy absorption across curved surfaces by utilizing bendable photovoltaic cells. That would be a sentence. So A would be the correct answer if there was a period right there after cells, but there's not. It's a continuation. And because it's just a comma, we don't have anything that is going to allow us to join two complete sentences together. So we're forced into choice D. It's not even like I really look at A, B, and C in any meaningful way. So this is a very important, like high priority question. If we get this wrong on the first practice test, this would be the kind of error to be upset with yourself about, because it involves just that one piece of memorization about how the colon works. It's not to say it's easy, but it's predictable. It's predictable. And they're definitely doing something that is also predictable in terms of traps, is they're setting me up to fail by giving me a colon in the first place, because they know that in high school, you're not using colons very often in your writing. So you just stay away from them because they don't feel normal. But the rule is the rule. We cannot change that. Any questions on this one? Any questions? Cool. Okay. If anything comes up, let me know. Well, let's try another grammar one, but also one where try not to lose points unnecessarily. Seeing a lot of very quick right answers, which is good. That means we're thinking about this the right way. And if you remember the strategy that's supposed to make this a quick win, feel free to share it. I mean, that's the rule. Liam's got the rule, and that's not wrong. Neil, that's the and Ansh, that's great. That's what I was looking for. So Liam, not wrong, but 3 versus 1. So what does that mean? Well, if I look at this, I predict the rule, and it's odd man out. And if I look, I've got some verbs, and there's multiple verb tense rules. This is one of the big things we focused on last time, and it's so important for avoiding traps. This verb tense rule probably is about singulars and plurals. Let's double check. A is plural, B is singular, C is plural, D is plural. 3 versus 1. It's probably this. So look, there's two ways to go about a question like this. Some of you are just going to be done at that point and just be like, all right, I'm trusting Mike. I'm trusting this 3 versus 1 thing, whatever. And that's fine. I'm okay with that. Certainly on the first practice test, I'm okay with that. The ideal is that we can then prove what the reasoning behind it is. So if you think you know the subject of this verb, feel free to share it. I will say, but feel free to share it first. But remember, the hardest thing about verb tense on the SAT is that there's 3 rules. We first have to think about singulars and plurals, because that's the one where the most traps occur. Then we have that one that I made up the name for it, the to and ing rule. And then we get to past, present, future. And that's the rule that most people are gonna think is going on here, right? Because we have past tense verbs in choices A and B. We have present tense indeed. C is a little weird. So, ooh, that's terrible handwriting. So we're up against something that looks like it's about the past, the present, or the future tense. And as soon as the SAT gets us thinking about that other rule, they've got us. Because even if we end up getting it right, we'll probably spend a long time debating what tense to use. And sometimes there is no way to know. It's not about the tense. It could be that any of the tenses could go in that blank. It's more that one of them is right because it's singular when we need a singular verb. And yes, collection is the subject. And that's weird for a couple reasons. First, I said it's a singular, right? We need a singular verb here. That's what was is. But collection doesn't feel singular, right? But even though a collection has multiple things in it, it is singular because it is one collection. So they're messing with us on that level, which is annoying. Plus, they've also put the subject after the verb, which is very weird. We almost never talk like that. It's allowed, it's grammatically correct, but it's really weird. And so they know that. Plus, look at all these plural things that are nearby. Foundations, temples, villas, centuries, even collection of what? Collection of mosaics, citizens. I mean, oh my God, they are really laying it on here. They want us to fall for a trap. But if we remember the strategy, we can get by without really knowing the rule in this particular case. So that's really important to be thinking about for the first practice test is, yes, we want to remember the grammar rules and what a colon does and all that stuff. But there's also these kind of strategic elements that we're not used to thinking about, but we really need to work them in. This, even more than the colon thing, this singular plural thing, if you get one of these wrong on your first practice test, you should be really upset. And if you watch my video going over a question that involves this rule, I guarantee one of the first things I will say is, you can't get this wrong. You can't get this wrong. And it's because how reliable this strategy is. Cool. All right. If there's questions about that, let me know. Otherwise, my point is made. Grammar, if we know what we're doing, if we know the strategies and the rules, these should be very quick, correct answers, pretty confident correct answers as we're going through. On the real test, make sure that you still bookmark any grammar question where you feel like you aren't 100% sure of the answer, where you feel like you're maybe relying a little bit on instinct rather than rules. Those would be ones to review later on, even if you end up having good instincts and getting them right. But the ultimate goal for your August SAT is that not only do you get all the grammar questions right, but you also get them right without bookmarking because you're confident in all the rules. I don't expect that on the first test, but that's the ultimate goal. That's up there as what we're trying to achieve. All right, then let's try a transition question because these would be next in line, right? We're going in order through what it should be like to experience a reading section if we're following the right pacing strategy. So what's going on with that? Good. That's what I wanted to do. My gosh, it's almost 6 o'clock already. All right. This is a case where, remember, we can use dumb summaries on passage questions. We can use them on vocab questions. And since, the meanings of sentences appear in these transition questions, they're good for that too. But the best place we're going to use dumb summaries on a transition question is in the answer choices. What do they mean? I want to show, this might mess my screen up. No, it's fine. If I turn the trainer on, right, transitions, some of these words might be there. And I see two of them, for instance, and specifically are both for example words. And remember, that is a bit of a problem because if they both mean for example, then they can't both be right. So that forces us down to hopefully an easier choice between nevertheless, which there it is, but, and consequently, which is so. And well, is this a contrast? Is it a but? The novel's widespread appeal made them highly profitable for publishers, but many publishing companies began mass producing Western dime novels to meet the enormous demand. No, if it was profitable, why would it make sense that they would mass produce them, right? And the novel's widespread appeal made them highly profitable for publishers, so many publishing companies began mass producing them. That makes sense. So there you go. This is a great example where maybe we would have gotten it right anyway, but I think the strategy really makes a difference here. It just gets rid of the clutter. Your brain really wants words like for instance and specifically to mean different things. And maybe they do in some rare cases, but it's just those rare cases aren't worth worrying about. The SAT has hard questions, but most of them aren't hard. So most of them are going to follow these predictable patterns. I absolutely use this strategy for these transition ones. I'm not necessarily looking at the answer choices first, like I do for grammar, but I'm certainly dumbing them down before I start really deciding what it could be. I might have a guess for that blank as I read the passage first, my own kind of instinct for what goes there. That might help, but I don't always. And so thinking about these in terms of their dumb versions is really helpful because then I can see those doubles and get rid of the doubles. But also when I'm plugging in, I'm not plugging in a word like consequently that I don't have a good sense for. I'm plugging in a word like so that I use every day, hundreds of times. So see, just use it there. That it's going to give me a much better chance. So this is another example of like moving away from just kind of bumbling through the questions by reading and following instincts. And now we have a process, we have a plan. We're going to be much better. Cool. All right. If you are a bit of a bumbler, though, then this shouldn't be too bad. Remember, these are at the end. And outlines, there's not even much strategy here. So I'm going to turn that trainer off. And okay, you were on that very fast, very impressive. That's the speed, the speediest one so far, I think. And that's good. That's a good sign. All right, this might be our first, unless I'm misreading something. I think this is our first time that everybody got it right. So very good. And that's what we want because the point I'm making with this is most of these outline questions, remember, are very easy. Some of you who may have taken a little longer on it might have just forgotten the strategy, which is to skip the bullet points and go right to the question. The question is going to give us a very specific goal. We just need to make sure we give the SAT what they want. This is not about grammar. This is not about what sentence sounds right, is most interesting. None of that matters. The student wants to emphasize a similarity between the two musical works. So what sounds like a similarity? Well, A starts with a contrast word. While Hopeful Dawn features a bright and optimistic opening melody, this other thing includes harsh, angular melodies. It's a contrast, right? That's not a similarity. They're saying they're different. B is only about one. So how could we say it's similar if it's only about one? C, it includes a very nice word if we're trying to get similar things across, right? The word both, so that's pretty good. And then D is again just about one. So not all of them are going to be this easy, but it is a reminder that in most cases we will not need these bullet points. We will be able to just go with the goal, follow the goal, and then one answer will fit it and the others won't make sense. But just pay attention to certain words in the goals. If you find yourself with multiple answers that work, it is probably the case that you missed a goal. There might be a secondary goal in the question. Maybe it says the student wants to emphasize a similarity between the two musical works, focusing on their symbolism, right? It could be something like that. And then there's two choices that are making a similarity, but one of them maybe talks about, I don't know, the instruments and one talks about the symbolism, right? So if we're down to two choices, with a question like this, an outline question, it's more likely that we just missed a secondary goal in the question itself. However, sometimes on the hardest ones, we might end up needing to go to these bullet points because there will be two answers that work, that accomplish the goal, but one of them is producing incorrect facts. And the facts are all right here. So if that happens, you can go here. But we're not starting with that assumption. We're always, whether it's reading or math, we're always trying to do the laziest thing possible to get the points. And so we read the question and hopefully it works out. If not, it's not like the bullet points run away. They're there. Cool. All right. Very important that we get that down, but let's move away because those are pretty easy. Let's try a vocabulary question. And remember, things like dumb summaries help here too. These are not ones that have, this isn't one that has particularly difficult vocabulary words. All right, maybe this one's a little easier than I thought. Not a bad thing. Oh, okay. Now we got some bookmarks. Okay. And remember, you can bookmark the questions we work on together too if you feel like just to keep the habit going of like, I'm not 100% sure. I feel like I took too long, anything like that, because that's what we want to be thinking about on the test. And it's easy to get distracted on the test by just like, okay, I got it. Let's move on to the next one. I would say the thing that makes this a little hard is I sense here, as soon as I read it, the bongo, a large antelope native to the dense forests of Central Africa, is often confused for its more elusive cousin, the okapi, despite the lack of genetic similarity between the two species. Recent dietary studies by wildlife biologists, whatever, suggest that bongo's feeding habits are barely blank. Right there, that word barely. I know that they are twisting the question. Doesn't mean it's going to be really hard. It just means I got to really pay attention because that's a negative word in front of the blank. So it might affect how I think about the blank. Then if I keep going, I see that right after that part, basically, we have a colon. And colons are really nice on these vocab questions. I forget if we talked about this explicitly, but a colon on a vocab question, we don't have to worry about the grammar of it, but we do need to understand that it's basically telling us they're going to repeat information. So I don't know what goes in the blank yet, but if I pay attention to what comes after the colon, I'm probably going to get some nice dumb summary that can help me out. So the both species primarily consume similar varieties of leaves, shoots, and fruits from the same canopy trees, and both exhibit nearly identical foraging patterns during dawn and dusk hours. Well, main ideas are repeated ideas. Both, similar, same, both, identical. Like they're hitting an idea here. So what are we saying about the bongos' feeding habits compared to those of the okapi? They're similar. So my blank is going to be something like similar to, except then we've got that word barely right in front. So this is where it gets tricky. We don't actually want to say it's similar to, we want to say the entire idea here, this is getting messy, but it is similar to. And so if we have this negative word in front, we need to have another negative word to cancel out. So we say it's barely different, right? And I'm playing with the connotations a little bit, right? Similar to is positive. But this is how they are making things hard, right? Is we know what they're saying. These two animals are similar. And yet we're going to end up filling that blank with a word that means the opposite of that, right? So compatible means similar. Reminiscent has to do with like memory. So that means similar. Dependent on, they're not like dependent on each other. Distinguishable. If something's distinguishable from something else, it's different from it. So that's going to be our answer. It's maybe obvious to you. Maybe you guys didn't have a lot of trouble fitting that in. It just sounded right. It felt right. But I do want to emphasize, start thinking about this stuff. Start noticing when they're really messing with us and they're putting these kind of double negatives into the questions. Sometimes your brain will naturally untwist that kind of stuff. And that's great. That's awesome. But other times they'll try to slip it by you. And so our goal is to be aware of it at all times so that when it gets really messy, we're paying attention to it and we're trying to avoid that trap. That's hard to do, but it goes again to that idea for our first practice test that we want to really start thinking strategically. It's not just about knowing facts and memorizing vocab words and grammar rules and transition words and math formulas. It's this other element of the SAT that gets overlooked, that they're trying to trick you. We have to be aware of it, and then we can beat them at their own game. We can adapt to that situation and play defense. So yeah, I mean, if you have any thoughts on that, if you feel like you saw it coming or didn't, feel free to share them. But my warning is you want to start noticing it even beyond just like the subconscious kind of like feelings you get as you go through a question. You really want it to be top of mind. Okay, cool. And obviously some grammar questions, some vocab questions are going to be hard because of the vocabulary itself, but that's a separate problem. That's not as important for our first practice test. It's much more that kind of the twisting of the question. Now, here's a short passage just to close things out. This would be one I'd probably do if I was starting to run out of time because it's short. And we will do math next if you're itching for it. Don't worry. All right, I see answers trickling in. We got a mixture here. My advice too is if I start explaining and I cross out your answer, don't feel compelled to switch it to something else. You could be wrong. It's fine. But I do want to give a little piece of advice before we start about what I think makes this question complicated is it feels very sciencey. And there's a lot of vocab words that seem a little hard, and maybe there's things we don't understand about what they're saying. But remember that whenever we're doing passages, whether it's a science passage or a poem, the full spectrum, we're thinking about strong words. What words convey a lot of meaning? And in my experience, most of the strong words, the words that really matter for a passage, are not unknown words we've never seen before. They're common words. They're things that we understand and use every day. And it's hard to separate out and say, okay, this is a strong word, this isn't, but some general guidelines. A lot of us get very fixated on the nouns, the things in the passage, right? What is it about, right? Okay, this is about fur. Yeah, but it's much more the adjectives and the verbs. What is the fur doing? What is our description of the fur? More important, the relationships that are going on in the passage. Most of these reading passages are not really about things. They're about relationships. They're about the relationship between things. Is one thing better than another? Is one thing more important than another? Is one thing matter, but another thing doesn't matter? Like all that stuff really is what comes up. And so as we're going through choices, we're thinking of the same thing. So if I'm looking at this, what do I notice here? It's theories that assume that living fur behaves like a stationary symmetrical lattice predicted that animals stay warm by trapping bubbles of air. But is the most important word in any passage. And so whether it's a but, or however, despite this, while, whatever it is, if there's a contrast word, most important word. But the movement of the individual hairs as animals walk, crawl, and swim makes the actual bubbles far more varied than those produced by uniform networks. Well, a lot of that I don't understand, but I know what it means to be more varied, right? That seems like a relationship, right? So, but got in there. That's a relationship word. More varied, that's a comparison. We know that comparisons are a big part of potential trap answers. So I understand that. Now, the quote might be helpful because that's what they're asking about. But honestly, a lot of times it's other stuff around the quote or around whatever they're focusing us on that matters. So the geometry gets pretty complicated underneath all that fur, according to this guy who does this stuff and conducted experiments involving the physics underlying animal behaviors. Great. Notice too how when I read passages and there's names and stuff I don't want to pronounce, I just ignore it. You can do that too. No one cares. It's just don't expend brain power pronouncing a name you don't know. Not that Marvin Clipperman is that hard, but okay. Emphasize that the bubbles created by actual fur differ from those found in theoretical models. Well, differ is definitely a comparison word. Is differ the same as vary? If something varies, it's different. There was a but. What was the but between? The but is between the theory and the actual thing. So maybe, but I don't know. I don't understand this enough to pick that. It has ideas that seem to match, but we got to keep going. B, explain that the structure of an animal's fur is composed of repeating units. Well, there's a strong word right there, repeating, right? That's specific. So is it repeating? And notice what I just did there. I turned this from this kind of open-ended, what's the function question to something that's a yes or no. Is this about repeating units? Is fur composed of repeating units? Well, they said things are symmetrical. That might be repeating, right? Uniform, that means something's repeating. But they're also saying the actual bubbles are more varied than the uniform networks, right? So it seems like, no, it's not repeating. It's the theory that's repeating, but the fur itself is maybe not. Again, I barely understand it, but I understand the relationship. It seems like this is saying the opposite. So let's get rid of that. C, analyze the mathematical formulas used to calculate fur thickness and thermal efficiency. What formulas? Just because we're talking about geometry doesn't mean there's formulas. I don't see any formulas. I don't think we're analyzing them. I don't know anything about that, but they're trying to link you up with math. D, describe how locomotion affects the size of bubbles trapped by animals' hairs. Well, the most important word there is the word how. And in the same way that I turned the word repeating into kind of a yes or no question, we can turn a how into a question. So if the purpose of this is to describe how locomotion affects the size of bubbles, then I should be able to look at this passage and understand and answer the question, how does locomotion affect the size of the bubbles? Well, I know that it does, right? It makes the bubbles varied, but how does it do that? I don't know. Does it make the bubbles bigger, smaller, rounder, squarer? I don't know. So it does say, it does talk about locomotion, that's movement. So the walk, crawl, swim is there. Does it talk about the size of the bubbles? Well, I guess, right? At least they're changing in some way, and they're definitely trapped by the animal's hairs. So everything about this choice is right, except that word how is forcing me to answer a question that I can't answer based on the information in the passage. I don't know how the motion affects the size of the bubbles. I know that it does affect it, but I don't know how. So not only would I be able to get this right, even though it is a hard question, but I would not need to mark this for review. And if you're not at this point yet, that's fine. But the reason I don't have to mark it is I know what I'm looking for in the choices. And I know how to trust myself when I'm looking at the passage and know that the words like but and more varied are going to matter much more than words like stationary symmetrical lattice. Honestly, I'm reading stationary symmetrical lattice the same way I'm reading Marvin Clipperman, a thermoregulation biologist. I don't care. I don't care. It might matter, but the passage isn't running away. So if I need it, it's there. And I did end up using the word symmetrical a bit, but like when I'm reading it the first time, it's in one ear and out the other. But a word like but, I'm on that. I'm on that fast because that word matters. And that's a word everyone knows. So that's something to keep in mind when you get to the passages. But this is going to take time. The hardest thing about the reading is getting used to the way the passages work and knowing what's a strong word and what matters. And this is why when you are reviewing the reading section, my videos are going to be great because I will tell you how I decided which words mattered and which ones don't. The College Board explanations will basically boil down to A is right because it's supported by the passage, and B, C, and D are wrong because they provide information that is not supported by the passage. And that's not a very useful explanation. So we don't want that. All right, excellent. Well, I'm bored of reading, so let's talk about math. Here is a good example of a question you wouldn't want to get wrong, and you wouldn't want to be unsure of. You want to get this fast. If you do solve it quick, feel free to do a private chat maybe so we don't spoil it, but I am curious what your methods are. Feel free to summarize it. I do see some bookmarks. I see a lot of right answers, but oh boy, yeah. Sounds like you guys aren't doing the way I would do it. Now, I get, like I said, at June SAT, I got an 800 in math. I know some things, but I'm not doing algebra here. You kidding me? A equals 1, B equals 1. Doing that in my head, right? 2 plus 5 minus 4 minus -2 minus 1 plus 5, right? Beauty of 1 when you got exponents is they don't matter. And all that matters is the coefficients. So I might write this on my page. 2 plus 5 is 7. 7 minus 4 is 3. -2 minus 1 is -3. -3 plus 5 is 2. 3 minus 2 is 1. A, 4 minus 3 is 1. Looks good. B, 4 minus 3 is 1 plus 10 is 11. Nope. C, 4 minus 5, -1. Nope. D, 4 minus 5 is -1 plus 10 is 9. Nope. Done. Now look, you guys got it right. And many of you told me you're doing it the normal way of algebra, and that's fine. But part of it is if you took 100 questions that were like this, I very much doubt any of you, and myself included, would get all of them right doing algebra every time. we would make a mistake somewhere, right? And we can see where mistakes can tend to populate, right? Is we have like a negative here that needs to be distributed. And if I distribute it wrong, something's going to go wrong, right? If I see 5a squared plus 5a squared, what do you get? You get 10a squared. And it's no surprise that 10a squared appears in two of the choices. They know what's going to go wrong if you make a mistake. So part of it is just understanding that you are a human who makes mistakes. No matter how good you are at math, negatives get lost, things get lost. And so attempting it with the strategy is your way of reducing the chance that you make an algebra mistake. Because if we have numbers in these parentheses, I don't need to distribute that negative. I just add them up and then it's just a minus sign, right? So that's an advantage of doing arithmetic. And this is, remember, the arithmetize strategy. If you don't remember that, go back to our class one, because we talked about this quite a bit. And so that's where we make up numbers. It does not matter what A and B are. It's pretty simple if they're one. So that's also something that comes from comfort with the strategy. But my advice would be this is where the score tends to change. If you're losing points because you make those algebra mistakes, that's bad. But also if you're losing time because the algebra is a little more time consuming, or you have to double check it because you're nervous about making the mistake, then you might still get the question right, but that might be a minute extra of time that you could have used on a much harder question. So maybe for the first test, that's a little big picture, but certainly for the second and third test, and especially if your scores are like 1400 and above or closing in on that, or you want to get those kinds of scores, you're not just thinking about right and wrong anymore. You're thinking about efficiency and what's going to be a risky way to solve something, but also what's going to be a faster way to solve something. It takes me a split second to realize A's and B's all over the place. I'm arithmetizing. So let's maybe try that again. And this time, see if you can force yourself to arithmetize, right? We've got a question with A's and B's and X's and Y's. How many times in school have you had a math question with 4 different letters? Probably not a lot. So that should stand out as being annoying. And when a math question is annoying, your first thought should be, can I avoid the algebra and find a better way? So try to make up some numbers. This one is more complicated. Did we do this question? If so, let me know, but I don't think we did. I think I planned to do it and then we ran out of time. And yes, there is a quicker way, but or there's a way that can be quick, I should say. Whether you see it or not, that's the hard part. And if you do get an answer using arithmetize, you can feel free to try some algebra to back it up, and vice versa. If you get an answer with some algebra, you better back it up with an arithmetize, making up numbers. This is definitely a case where you want to start with A and B, because A and B are the complicated variables, right? Look at all the stuff that's happening with them. We're squaring them, we're subtracting them. X and Y, we're getting them from our A and B. So we'll get X and Y through the math, but A and B we can make up. So I'm going to do that. You can keep going if you've got your own method here, but I'm just going to say 2 and 1, knowing that there might be a problem with this, but that's okay. So 2 squared, A squared minus B squared is X. So that's 2 squared minus 1 squared. 4 minus 1 is 3. Cool. And then if we do the other one, that's a plus b is y. So 2 plus 1 is 3. So that's also y. So what do they want? They want a minus b. So that's 2 minus 1, and that's 1. So that's kind of what my answer should be. Now, if I get into it, right, remember, just got to keep track of everything. This is a great kind of scratch paper question. You got a lot of letters. You got to keep track of them. So x minus y, 3 minus 3 is 0. So not 1. 3 times 3 is 9, not 1. Then here's the problem, right? Because 3 over 3 is 1, but y over x is still 3 over 3. So that's also 1. So I did that on purpose because it's a reminder that when you do arithmetize, sometimes, through no fault of your own, the numbers work in multiple answer choices, and we need to make sure we try every answer choice to be really sure what the answer is. Or maybe at this point, you do have some sort of realization because of the algebra and the fact that we've now eliminated two choices, maybe just the fact that there's fewer things going on, you can start to see the algebra more clearly. But if not, no big deal. Just pick a new number. My advice, though, is try to think about what's happening. The fact now that we can see 2 minus 1 is what we want to do in the end, but we don't want a minus b to be 1 because then these two are still going to keep giving us the same value. So when you adjust your numbers, don't go to 3 and 4 or 3 and 2. Spread them out. Just do like, okay, A is, I don't know, 5 and B, let's keep B as 1, right? So X is going to be 25 minus 1 is 24, and Y is 5 plus 1, which is 6. So what is A minus B? So that's 5 minus 1 is 4. So choice C is now 24 over 6, which is 4. D is 6 over 24, which is a fraction, right? That's 1/4. So C is our final answer. Yeah, this is a case where it's a little messy, but then the big question is, are you actually going to see the thing you're supposed to see? And some of you might. What we're supposed to do here, what the College Board explanation will show you, is that a squared minus b squared is the same as a plus b times a minus b. And since a plus b is y, right, and a minus b is what we're looking for, we can say, okay, this becomes y times a minus b, and that's equal to a squared minus b squared, which is x. And then how do we get a minus b? Well, you just divide by y, right? So this does take a few seconds. But I think a big misconception people have with these kinds of solutions is they don't factor into the solving time the idea time, right? Yes, the solution is fast, but how long does it take you to have that idea, for that light bulb to go off in your head that like, oh, this is a factoring question and this is what I got to do? If it takes you 2 minutes of staring at the question to have the light bulb go off, then this is not faster. Just doing a bunch of basic arithmetic is faster. And so just for now, I say still default to the strategy method. Just try to force that into your brain and take chances on it in places where you maybe wouldn't otherwise. That's why it's okay if the score goes down on this first practice test. But it's a good example of like, if you don't try these strategies, you won't learn the places where it is efficient versus the places where it's inefficient. We'll get time for one or two more. I want to hit the other main math idea here. That was hard. Let's see if we remember. We did talk a little bit about quadratics. This is where the memory thing comes in. Hopefully you guys did the quadratic basics or quadratic landmarks and basics lesson for homework. That's really important. We need to know all this about quadratics. This is one where hopefully you've memorized the right things. I would also say, if you get this fast, this is an excellent opportunity where you can be really sure that you're not falling for a trap. Because look at those answer choices. This would make me think I got to be really careful. If I get a negative wrong, if I think about it, one negative, slightly wrong, that's it, game over. I'm going to get something wrong for no good reason. I might have known the right fact, but it's just easy to mess up. So this is a great example of not only getting things right efficiently, but knowing when to check it and knowing how you can prove an answer, even when you've got a really strong feeling. And if you have no idea what's going on, well, the way I'm hinting at checking it would absolutely solve it for you without any doubt. And especially for this one, this might be our last one. Uh, if you haven't proven your answer quickly and confidently, you better be bookmarking it. I want us thinking about that. If you're confident in your answer, that's fine. Don't bookmark it. That's fine. But really hone in on that idea. Okay. I'm going to do something I never do, which is without explaining anything, reveal that half of you got it wrong without a bookmark. Why? How's that possible? This is terrible. This is easy. Not necessarily an easy question, but easy to avoid a mistake. Now, a lot of you are going to look at this and say, okay, I get it. This is the vertex form. I learned that. I did the lesson that Mike said. I, of course, do all the homework and never have any issues with it. I get it, right? So this is y equals ax minus h squared plus k. They use different letters, but it's the vertex form, right? So that means a tells me the direction. This is clearly upside down, so I need a negative number, right? So that's, in this case, negative a, the way it's phrased, right? And then the HK is the vertex. It's in the first quadrant. So this is a positive X value and a positive Y value, right? So these both need to be positive numbers. Now, if we follow that, yeah, like, okay, the negative B is a little weird, but if we're following the formula, it should work. But if we're getting confused in any way, well, it's easy to fall into a trap, right? Choice C, which a lot of you picked, is very tempting because it does have similar properties, but we can easily test this by just going to Desmos, right? But here it's going to be, well, I could do h of x, it doesn't really matter, but h of x equals a times, or I'll put the right answer in, negative a times x minus b squared plus c. And look, it prompts me to add a slider, right? Well, we know that's an amazing Desmos strategy. And if we do, it defaults to A being 1, B being 1, and C equals 1. And we can play with that if we want. But remember, what did they say? All we have to do is follow the instructions in the question. A, B, and C are positive constants. Well, 1 and 1 are all positive constants. Does this look what we have? Yeah, it's upside down. It's maybe a little bit different, but if we keep doing positive numbers here, we maybe see that, oh, okay, this kind of looks like it, right? But let's say we thought choice C was the answer, right? What is that? Why is that one different? That one has a positive B and a negative C. This looks very different from our picture. It's in the wrong place, right? So, okay, I can play with these things, and if it makes it more positive, that seems to be going the wrong way, right? It's not going up here where I want it to be. If I make this more positive, it just gets more narrow, so that doesn't help. And this just makes it go down. So this seems wrong. So if you got this wrong, you had an easy way to prevent that error. Just put it in the calculator. And that is a bigger picture idea that we want to make sure we're thinking about for the math is logic versus proof. If you are thinking about math and not doing math, that's bad. You're walking into traps on the SAT, especially when we think about the pacing strategy we talked about before, when we know we're getting towards hard questions. If you are doing very little work to get the answers to those hard questions, you are almost certainly falling into a trap. And maybe there are ways to avoid it by using a strategy, going to the calculator. But that's really bad in reading when we just think through a grammar rule, when we just think about how it might sound best versus when we actually use the rule. It's the same thing in math. If we do math, that is always better than thinking about math, feeling our way through an equation. So even if you got this right, I would hope that you saw that there was an opportunity to prove your hunch correct. Because for every 100 hunches that you have, you're going to have some that are bad. And that's what the SAT is going to take advantage of. In order to get 14, 1500s, those really high scores, you cannot let them get you at all. And so try to work that into your process as well, as not only how are you going to solve questions, but how are you going to check to make sure that you're not falling for traps. Cool. All right. Well, we covered a lot today. I hope I really emphasized the main ideas for this practice test. I wish you all the best of luck. If you have questions as you are working on the test or as you're about to work on the test, feel free to chat. I do check that roughly every day, so I might not have an immediate response, but sometime in the 24 hours, I'll get back to you. If you have questions now, I'm happy to answer them as well. But like I said, our main priority is not scores. It is strategies. It is trying new things. So use this bookmarker app, have that training mode on so you have that opportunity to keep reminding yourself of that. And make sure when you review, you use those bookmarks. Don't just review wrong answers. We want to know what did you get wrong, but also what could you have done better on to get that stuff right. So all of the stuff for the test, remember, is under the scores panel of the portal. So just take a look there. You got instructions. When you're done, you can enter the results there. And then if you have any official scores, put those in there too. Cool. Thanks, guys, for a great class 3. Like I said, good luck. And if you have questions, stick around and ask them.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Yes, you too. You too. Thank you, guys. Good luck on the test.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, how should we be incorporating vocabulary practice? So I will have a much better answer for that next week and probably even during the week. So make sure you check this a little regularly because I have a feeling I'm going to be able to do a new feature post here. Right now for vocab, if you go to flashcards and hit vocab, you're going to see all these different sets. And you can start working on these. You have flashcards you can learn. There's 30 per set. And then for each of them, there's 2 quizzes. One that kind of groups the words by similar meaning, one that it makes you think about them individually. So you can do this if you're itching to do vocab. This is still there if you want to start on it. So grand scheme of things, though, vocab is not a high priority. You can study 1,000 words and 2 of them will show up on the test. Something like grammar, though, there's like 15 rules and they will all show up on the test every time. Same with the transition. So in terms of quizzes, that's the better quiz, is make sure you're comfortable with all the transitions because those will show up, certainly the top 20, but also even a lot of these uncommon ones. So that's a great place to start if you don't have those all memorized. But yeah, vocab at a certain point, that's why you're getting stuff wrong. Yeah, there's no good answer. You got to just grind it out and just try to memorize words. Yeah. Hopefully that's an answer to your question. Feel free to follow up if you want, though. Cool. Any other questions? Any others?
Yeah, what should the time control be on the practice test? Should it be the normal one or extended time?
Unless you get approved for extended time, you should definitely still be doing the normal. So if you have an extended time accommodation, you can do that in Blue Book. But even if you do have accommodations, I do want to point out that I think it says it here. If you do get accommodations, just don't use this raised line drawings thing because sometimes people have accommodations just like check all the boxes. That one will give you a different test. It's the linear test and it's not good. You'll still take it in Blue Book, but it's not, you don't want to do that. It'll mess everything up. So if you get extended time, feel free to mark it off in Blue Book. But if you're just looking for extra time so that you can use this training mode, nah, it's okay. Just use it. It won't suck up that much time. I think if anything, it'll speed you up because it'll remove a lot of that time you spend debating what to do for a question. And so you'll be forced to get into it faster. So yeah, just regular time unless you're approved.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.